On today's World Insight, in defense of one China, with the People's Liberation Army holding drills around Taiwan Island as, quote, punishment against, quote, independent forces. How far will the Chinese mainland go in preserving territorial integrity? What are the crucial takeaways from the drills?
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian. The Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army has begun joint military drills around Taiwan Island. They are taking place in the Taiwan Strait, Taiwan Island's north, south, and east, as well as the areas around the islands of Kinmen, Matsu, Soochow, and Dongying. The spokesperson for the Theater Command says the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force have been mobilized to hold the drills from Thursday to Friday. They will focus on joint sea-air combat readiness patrols, seizure of comprehensive battlefield control, and precision strikes on key targets. The spokesperson says the drills serve as a strong punishment for the separatist acts of the Taiwan Independence Forces and a stern warning against the external forces. The PLA has released posters showing the equipment involved in the military drills. On cross-Strait ties, I have been talking to a series of experts from both the mainland and Taiwan. First, let's listen to my phone call with military expert Zhang Junshe about the scale and intensity of the joint military drills. Mr. Zhang is a former vice president of the Naval Research Institute of China. Mr. Zhang, thank you so much for joining us. As a military expert, how would you describe the intensity and the scale of these joint military drills? Would you give more detailed analysis?
I think this is a theater campaign-scape joint military exercise and training. The forces of the main military services are being organized and dispatched to conduct the joint military drills. Compared with previous series of the joint sword military exercises, the scope of this joint exercise is much larger and wider. Since then, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's provocative visit to the island of Taiwan in August 2022, the PLA has organized several rounds of large-scale exercises as countermeasures to provocations by Taiwan independence secessionists and the collusions with external forces, in addition to holding regular patrols and training exercises in the region. These exercises and training were mainly conducted around the island of Taiwan, but today's joint military exercises feature an integrated plan covering not only the main island of Taiwan, but also its outlying islands. The military drills are being conducted not only in the Taiwan Strait, but also in areas around the islands of Kinmen, Matsu, Soochow, and Dongying, which are important strongholds of the Taiwan authorities in its military operations against the mainland. Altogether, we can see on the map 9 exercise zones surrounding the island of Taiwan. In today's exercise, another highlight we can see is one of the exercise subject, that is joint precision strikes on key targets. I think this means that the PLA will use the forces and weapons of the military services to launch precision strikes on high-value targets on the island of Taiwan. It forms a powerful deterrent against the separatist force on the Taiwan island. Meanwhile, in addition to PLA's exercise, the Coast Guard of East China's Fujian province today also launched a comprehensive law enforcement exercise in waters around Soochow and Dongying Islands. It is the first time the mainland's Coast Guard vessels have entered waters around Soochow and Dongying Islands. Designed to serve as strong deterrence and warning, the exercise destroyed the notion of so-called restricted waters imposed by the Taiwan authorities.
Mr. Zhang, through these joint military drills, what kind of message do you think the PLA is sending? And how is it going to demonstrate its capabilities in safeguarding China's sovereignty and territorial integrity?
The military drills are serving as a strong punishment for the separatist acts of Taiwan independence forces and a stern warning against the interference and provocations by external forces. To demonstrate its capabilities of safeguarding national sovereignty and territorial integrity, the exercises display the PLA's strike capabilities across all directions of the island without any blind spots. The exercises involve the patrol of vessels and planes closing in on areas around the island of Taiwan and integrated operations inside and outside the island chain to test and show the real joint combat capabilities of the forces of the command. As the exercises are underway, the PLA Eastern Theater Command released a set of posters themed cross-Strait lethality, depicting some of its weaponry aimed at Taiwan independence secessionists, including the J-20 stealth fighter jet, the J-16 multi-role fighter jet, the Type 052D guided missile destroyer, the Type 071 comprehensive landing ship, the DF-16A short-range ballistic missiles, and the modularized long-range multiple launch rocket system. These are just some of the typical weapons and equipment in the military preparations to deal with the Taiwan question. The PLA has a complete arsenal available to resolve the Taiwan question if a prospect for peaceful reunification no longer exists, and the Taiwan independence secessionist forces and external interference of forces should fully realize that the PLA is fully determined and capable of safeguarding China's national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and development interests.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhang.
Thank you.
That's my conversation with Mr. Zhang Junshe, a military expert from China's mainland. Lai Ching-te's speech was full of wrong understanding of history and the legal status of Taiwan. On the legal and historic issues, here's my conversation with Victor Gao Zhikai, a chair professor at Soochow University, who is also the vice president of the Center for China and Globalization. I'm joined now by Victor Gao Zhikai, chair professor at the Soochow University and vice president of the Center for China and Globalization. Mr. Gao, good to see you. Tell me more about what do you consider as the significance of this latest exercise?
Thank you very much for having me. The joint exercise by the Chinese military in the Eastern Theater, I think, will be a turning point. Meaning China need to do something to retaliate against the local Taiwan leader when he basically issued a declaration of war as far as the situation across the Taiwan Strait is concerned. Because on May the 20th, Lai Ching-te basically declared that China is China and Taiwan is Taiwan. The two sides are not subordinated to each other. And then the irony was that he traced the history of Taiwan all the way to 1624, as if alleging that 1624 was the beginning of the 400 years of Taiwan's internationalization. Now, nothing could be further true from this, because 1624 was the year when the Dutch colonists tried to move in to conquer the southern part of Taiwan. It's not a year of glory for Taiwan. It's a year of national shame for people in Taiwan as well as here in the mainland. Then he completely disregarded the real legal cornerstone of the situation of Taiwan today, which is the Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation. I think the Chinese military decided to do this joint military exercise not only to increase the preparedness just to deal with such exigencies like this, but also to warn Lai Ching-te and his separatist followers that they cannot have a free play about the situation about the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. And China will really take firm actions to bring them back to the one China policy, because no one will ever tolerate the one China, one Taiwan situation that Lai Ching-te and his followers are really pushing to the edge of the envelope, triggering this crisis.
Does it mean that the central government has lost confidence in any signs of a recovery of relations across the Taiwan Straits?
I would say the following. First of all, the Chinese government and the people in mainland have great expectation for the people in Taiwan. And we believe that the separatists are truly a very small minority who are dedicated to play with fire in provoking tensions and escalations across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. However, Mr. Lai Ching-te is the local leader, and he does command the military in Taiwan, and also to the very large extent, the foreign affairs of Taiwan, in quotation mark, of course. Therefore, he can really take actions to do a lot of damage to this one China policy. Further, Lai Ching-te and his followers are not acting by themselves in a vacuum. They are aided and abetted by some big power behind them. And these foreign powers may want to use Lai Ching-te and his followers as a proxy in a larger scale confrontation against China. That's why I think the Chinese government has made the decision that they can no longer tolerate such blatant and wanton violation of the one China policy, aided and abetted by foreign powers. And they need to do something to warn Lai Ching-te that if you take one step further, then, as we say in Chinese, the mountains will shatter and the earth will move. And the Taiwan separatist movement will be dealt with very swiftly and promptly.
And Mr. Gao, as we know, there have been some interactions between China and the Philippines and China and Japan regarding the issue of South China Sea or the issue of Taiwan. Now, the latest joint military drills, what kind of message does China send to its neighbors?
China has 14 land neighboring countries and 6 maritime neighboring countries. For the 14 land neighboring countries, China has signed border treaties with 12 of them, which is a very large percentage. Now, there is indeed some territorial dispute between China and the Philippines and China and Vietnam, you name it, in the South China Sea. But China's position is very clear and very consistent. That is, let's talk about diplomatic solution of the differences, for example, aimed at maximizing the benefit, promoting peace and stability in the South China Sea. Now, some countries mention they worry about the navigation safety in the South China Sea, but they fail to come up with any single instance of navigation safety being destroyed or damaged in the South China Sea. South China Sea, for the past several decades, has always been peaceful, stable, and there is no war, there is no military conflict. I think it is those countries which have ulterior motives, which want to use the Philippines as a proxy to provoke a larger scale confrontation with China. You mentioned Japan. Allow me to mention one thing very simple. Japan unconditionally surrendered in 1945. Japan signed a legally binding legal document of unconditional surrender. And allow me to remind your audience, Japan not only unconditionally surrendered to the United States, Japan also unconditionally surrendered to China. Therefore, for Japan to talk about getting involved in a military confrontation across the two sides of the Taiwan Strait it is in itself a direct violation of the Japanese unconditional surrender to China back in 1945. It is against the Japanese constitution. It's against the Japanese government's commitment and undertaking under this unconditional surrender document in 1945. And it is against the international order that all of us are living through. Therefore, I would urge the Japanese leaders to read its own unconditional surrender instrument and realize the real nature of relations between China and Japan, and avoid and refrain from doing anything which is in violation of the Japanese commitments undertaken in the unconditional surrender document in 1945.
All right. Victor Gao Zhikai, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Appreciate it. You're watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. The PLA drills are being held after Lai Ching-te's remarks on May the 20th. I have talked to Joanna Lei in Taipei, who is a former legislator in Taiwan's Kuomintang party, about reactions on the island and more about Lai's political stance. Joining us, Joanna Lei, former legislator in Taiwan's Kuomintang party. Joanna, good to see you. Now, today we have seen the joint military drills in such an intensity. Tell me more about the reactions on the island.
Well, I think it's really intense in terms of its overall impact. Of course, the DPP would try to underplay this by saying that this is another way of mainland China trying to bullying Taiwan. And you can see a lot of international press picked up on that. But in reality, we have never seen any military drill in this scope and intensity, plus resolve and readiness. Everything happened in a totally surprising fashion so that people reacted differently. I think the overall scope is something that's sending an extremely strong signal, not only to Taiwan, because if we look inside out, we can see that Taiwan is completely blocked by military air, sea, and air force around the island, but to the international community, especially the military strategists as well, because it is almost like a war game play by play. It's indicating very strongly the A2AD zone for mainland China in terms of defense is to the east of Taiwan Island. So everything to the west of that line is within the A2AD zone. So that's extremely strong signal to international military and strategists, in addition to just people in Taiwan.
Many analysts have suggested that the latest joint military drill is a strong response to the rhetoric coming from Lai Ching-te, and in recent days, interactions Taiwan authorities had with the rest of the world. Now, tell us more about your analysis as a former political figure on the island.
I believe that Lai Ching-te, in his inaugural address, has advanced three things. One is he has advanced the two-state theory started by Li Denghui, followed by Tsai Ing-wen, in new languages. This two-stateism is to replace whatever we're discussing in terms of 92 consensus. The second one is he revised Taiwan history by presenting a Taiwan that has little to do with mainland China, therefore we're not one family, but has a lot to do with international globalization in trade. He started the history of Taiwan's globalization in 1624 when Dutch established a colony on Taiwan Island. The third thing is he almost promised to be an extremely harsh player in terms of cross-strait relationship. First, he promised in his 4 pillars of peace, which was referenced in the speech, that he would increase our military build-out. Secondly, he would use economic means and consider economic relationship as part of security measures. And thirdly, he almost promised to have a stronger hand, more strong-handed legislature towards Taiwan and people in Taiwan with mainland China ties. All three will present an extremely strong regime anti and hostile to mainland China. And that will be the first term of Lai Ching-te's promise. This is his blueprint.
You know him a long time ago, and of course the political scene on the Taiwan island has been quite dramatic over the years. What do you think has been his intention, and whether this joint military drills will send the right signal to those who are, for those who have a second thought about what they are trying to indicate or advocate?
Let me start by his persona. Lai Ching-te is an extremely committed Taiwan independence revolutionist. Secondly, he is an extremely strong-handed and seasoned politician. And thirdly, he has an extremely educated and civilized language and appearance. All three combined, DPP will depict him as a stronghold, strong superhero protecting democracy and freedom, and be a part of an international ally, therefore contributing to global peace and prosperity. All of this is a very beautiful facade underneath a very strong-minded leader who would always react to pressure by pushing back. And I say this very carefully. When Tainan City Council had a problem with him, he pushed back by never attending. As a mayor, he never attended city council's meeting for an extended period of time. When he was in the government, the Tsai Ing-wen's administration, every time there is a major pressure, he always pushed back. So I'm afraid that all this pressure will give him further ability or language to tell his followers that mainland China is coercing, is strong-handing Taiwan, and therefore you must follow me.
Now, how intense do you see the future political landscape will be in Taiwan, given who Lai is and also his rhetorics recently?
I'm afraid that he's going to be very heavy-handed towards anybody who promotes a cross-strait relationship different from his. And he will be very handed towards people with mainland China ties. The small promise he made in his inaugural address, that is to have mainland China students and tourists have a very strong underpinning, that is mainland China has to talk to me, Lai Ching-te, the elected official. So he wanted to use this as an ability to control the destiny, re-establish an engagement, but all in all, his underlying strong Taiwan independence ideal will not change.
Now, the public in Taiwan, how are they reacting to what is going on for the past day? What do you think are the messages they are suggesting to the current Taiwan authorities?
Well, unfortunately, individuals have little to say when political elites decide their futures, right? So what the public reaction can be seen probably will be in the stock market, I think will happening the exodus of capital, individuals, students outside of Taiwan. If there were such an exodus, a massive departing of capital and individuals, then Lai Ching-te will probably go into his stronghold, his strong base, and ask for greater support. So I don't see him budging or softening up, but I do see a change in character. He will send other people to speak, and he will ask other people to use softer language so that there's no additional provocation. However, Lai Ching-te as a leader will not change his position. This is his history, and this is what he promised. He said, when I become a politician, I made such and such. And when I become the leader, I hold the future in my hand, in my shoulders. And the future, he has clearly outlined a future fairly different from mainland China's way of seeing Taiwan. And he would try continually to internationalize whatever Taiwan's confrontation or issue may be.
How dangerous a local leader is he?
I think he holds the executive branch. He also holds the judicial branch. So he has extremely strong power. He can easily be an authoritarian leader, which he despised, But in terms of our current structure, he holds these two branches and therefore can exert huge pressure on the everyday people on Taiwan.
I've been talking to Joanna over the past hours, analysts both on the mainland and also from the military. They suggest the latest joint military drills from the central government's perspective is for the long-term peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. Of course, that will be portrayed and shaped rhetorically by some others in a very different way. From where you are, being a political figure in Taiwan for long and have been, knowing all the key figures on both sides, either Kuomintang and DPP, tell me more about what do you think is the real essence of this joint military exercise? What would guarantee the peace and stability of the Taiwan Straits?
I think one of the purposes is certainly to reduce chances of miscalculation by showing force in such a way, in a concerted joint operation way. It is showing a very strong signal, not only to Taiwan, but also to the other so-called ally countries who would support Taiwan militarily, that if you were to consider the future scenario, any war game scenario will almost do exactly what this military drill is. It controls the air and sea passages to Taiwan. It also controls magnetic electronic wave. So this is a new battlefield situation. Whatever they are planning in terms of after certain days of potential confrontation coming to Taiwan's aid must take into account this show of force. So in that sense, it will reduce the chance of miscalculation, but I don't think it will reduce the chance of deliberate maneuver.
The central government has been indicating once and again the Taiwan question as the red line, and it has also been communicated very clearly in many bilateral discussions and multilateral exchange of opinions. So how do you see the rest of the world should understand this principle and also the red line coming from China?
Well, that is why I think our future, our collective future, is at a bifurcation point. If the world continues to see Taiwan, especially Lai Ching-te's Taiwan, as part of the international coalition against China, and also potentially bringing into a confrontation in the West Pacific, then we are heading to a doomsday scenario. But on the other hand, if the rest of the world respect China's perspective in terms of this as being a domestic affairs to be resolved by people across Taiwan Strait, then Lai Ching-te and his government will have to work within that parameter and started other ways of proposing or engaging in whatever he believes in. So whether this is an international affairs or a domestic affairs is the bifurcation point, extremely critical point at this time.
Joanna Lei, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing your time on the critical day.
Thank you.
That's Joanna Lei, former legislator from Taiwan. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team of World Insight. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.